Blueprint YAML development is a three-part video series. In this video, we will learn the basics for developing blueprints. Blueprints are defined using YAML files. The main one is the blueprint YAML. For this procedure, we will need a valid cloud account in the space. For illustration purposes, we'll be using an Azure cloud account called Azure 4. And we'll also need a sample blueprint with working application and service YAMLs. When developing blueprints, we recommend using one of our sample blueprints as a foundation and modifying it as needed. We'll make a copy of the integration, environment, VM, and Azure database sample blueprint YAML and call it My Blueprint for brevity. Let's edit the file. In the description section, provide an informative description for the blueprint. Space users will see this description in the blueprint catalog. In the cloud section, set the cloud account and region in which the environment will be created. Colony supports AWS and Azure, as well as Kubernetes clusters. If you're using a Kubernetes cluster on one of the supported cloud providers, specify the cloud account name followed by the name of the Kubernetes compute service. In the input section, declare the blueprint's parameters. These parameters can be passed to the blueprint's applications and services, and filled in by the user, API, or CI/CD tool when launching the blueprint. You can also set the following properties on each parameter. Display style to display the password in plain text. To hide the password behind bullets, enter the value masked. Description to be displayed to the user. Default value to automatically populate the parameter with a default value when creating the sandbox. And you can also set optional to true if you want to allow the user to leave the parameter empty. Colony also has several reserved input values that are calculated when creating the sandbox. These include the sandbox ID, DNS name of the application in the sandbox, output of some specific application or service, the sandbox's public address, and the ID of the sandbox's virtual network. For example, this parameter uses a reserved input value for the sandbox ID, and this one returns the virtual network ID. The application section defines the blueprint's applications. The app name is the only mandatory field. An application YAML and containing folder with this name should reside in the applications folder within the blueprint repository. You can also set the number of virtual machines to create, provide an alias for the application, pass inputs to the application, and also define the deployment order of the blueprint's applications and services. In other words, if this application depends on any other applications or services, specify their names here to make sure they are deployed first. For example, the Java Spring website passes 5 inputs and depends on the Azure MySQL service. In the Services section of the Blueprint YAML, you declare the blueprint services. Colony integrates with cloud services using Terraform, and the Terraform file should be placed in the Service YAML folder within the blueprint repository. Same as with applications, the service name is the only mandatory field. A service YAML and containing folder with this name should reside in the services folder within the blueprint repository. You can set inputs to pass to the service and define dependencies. Some applications may need to use certain artifacts as part of their deployment. For example, artifacts for deploying a new version of your software or artifacts for testing a new version of your code. Colony integrates with Azure Storage, AWS S3, and JFrog Artifactory. Artifacts are defined in the Blueprint YAML and exposed as inputs to the user who launches the blueprint. You can optionally provide a default value for the artifact's path, or keep it empty, making the input mandatory for the end user to fill in. It should look something like this. In the application YAML video, we discuss how to pass artifacts to the application's initialization script. This concludes Part 1 of the Blueprint YAML series. Please carry on to Part 2 to learn about advanced configurations